Hi, I'm Robert McClellan. This is a quick video for students in ES101 at Wilfrid Laurier University. It's a quick introduction to the fifth of 5 labs that students are going to do in this course, in which they look at pipelines and the controversies that surround them. Now, as you can see, I'm in a parking lot here in Waterloo, Ontario, full of cars, and most of them are propelled by either gasoline or diesel. And the fuel in those tanks does not come from Canada, but probably was refined from oil that was imported either from the United States or from one of a half dozen countries overseas, perhaps in the Middle East, North Africa, West Africa, or maybe down in Latin America, Mexico, Venezuela. And that may strike you as unusual. After all, Canada has tremendous oil reserves out in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and yet the gasoline in the tanks of these cars here in Waterloo came from overseas. And the reason for that has a lot to do with the geographical orientation of Canada's pipeline network. If you were to look at a map of Canada's pipelines, oil pipelines, what you would see is that most of the pipelines that run out of Alberta and Saskatchewan head south towards the United States, some towards Chicago, others across the US Great Plains towards Oklahoma and Texas, where there's a large refinery complex. There's a single pipeline that runs from Alberta to Vancouver, but the volume of oil that's transported on it is relatively small compared to that which heads to the US. There are no pipelines at this moment in time that run from Western Canada to Eastern Canada. And so that's why when we gas up our cars here in Waterloo, what we're doing is using gasoline that's been tanked to ports on the east coast of North America and brought inland for refining. Now, Canadian energy companies have been talking for many years about the need to expand our pipeline network so that they can reach destinations not only in the United States but also in other countries where there's great demand for oil products, such as in Europe, such as in India, in China, and parts of Asia. And in response to this, there's been 4 large proposals that have been put forward in recent years. And from west to east, these are the Northern Gateway, the Keystone XL project, the Line 9 reversal, and the Energy East project. And it's the Energy East project that's the one that's of interest in this week's lab. But before we talk about that, I think it's worthwhile bringing up a bit of details about these other 3 projects. The first one I want to talk about is the Northern Gateway. This is a pipeline that is proposed to run from Alberta to the coast of British Columbia, over the mountains, and once it reaches the port of Kitimat, BC, it would be loaded onto tanker ships and then exported to Asian markets. The second proposal is called Keystone XL, and it would be a large pipeline that runs from Alberta south to Oklahoma and Texas. The Canadian portion of this pipeline has already been built. They're waiting for approval from the US government to complete the American portion. The third proposal is something called Line 9 reversal. Line 9 is a pipeline that actually exists right now. It was built in the late 1970s and runs from Sarnia, Ontario to Montreal in Quebec. And the reason it was built is because at Sarnia, it can connect to the US pipeline network. And so when it was built, the idea was to bring oil from Western Canada through the US pipeline network to Sarnia and then ship it on to Montreal for refining and export overseas. But what happened is that not long after it was built, the price of oil plunged, and so it was no longer cost effective to run as it was designed. So instead what they did was they reversed the direction of flow. And so that's the way it operates today, is that tanker ships arrive on the east coast at Montreal, they bring in oil, and that oil is piped to Sarnia for refining. Now, about a year or so ago, the operators of Line 9, a company called Enbridge, received permission to reverse the flow, the direction of flow once again, so that Line 9 will once again flow from Sarnia to Montreal, bringing product from Western Canada to Eastern Canada. Now, each of these 3 pipeline proposals has run into a variety of opposition from environmental groups, from landowners, and First Nations when the pipelines cross their traditional territories. And one of the major concerns that drives these oppositions is the fact that what's going inside the pipelines. Oil that's produced in Alberta's tar sands is not that black-brown, liquidy stuff that you imagine flows out of gushers at oil rigs, or that you would find if you opened up the oil cap in your automobile engine. The oil that's in the Alberta tar sands is very thick, heavy, and is mixed up with a lot of sand and grit. It's actually referred to as bitumen, which is the British word for road tar or asphalt. And that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like thick road tar. And it either needs to be dug out and scooped up out of the ground, like you would mine it, or it needs to be steamed out of the ground. So you need to inject hot water, steam into the ground to loosen up the oil from all that sand and grit so it can be moved to the surface. Even once you get it to the surface, it's still too thick to push through a pipeline. So what they need to do is to mix this bitumen with condensates. These condensates are chemicals that are produced from natural gas. Some of them are toxic, and they're mixed with the bitumen to create diluted bitumen or dilbit, and that makes it viscous enough to pipe down or to send down a pipeline. And so a lot of environmental groups and others are concerned about this dilbit because it doesn't behave like regular oil, which floats on water. If you get a spill of dilbit into a waterway, the dilbit starts to head towards the bottom of the water. And that's exactly what happened a couple of years ago when there was a spill in an Enbridge pipeline that crossed the Kalamazoo River in Michigan. The dilbit got into the waterway, it went down to the bed of the stream, and it took over $1 billion in several years to clean it all up. So that's one of the major concerns people have about these pipeline proposals. Energy East is the fourth one, and that's the subject of this week's lab. Energy East proposes to convert an existing natural gas pipeline that runs from Alberta to Ontario and convert one of the pipes so that it will transport dilbit and oil instead of natural gas. The company that operates it, TransCanada Pipelines, would also need to add some additional pipeline capacity in Alberta and Saskatchewan and build new pipeline from Ontario to Quebec and to New Brunswick. And there what they hope to do is to create some additional oil shipment terminals so that the oil can get to ports where it can be loaded onto tanker ships and exported to Europe and India. And Energy East too has run into a variety of opposition. It also has its supporters as well, and that's the whole purpose of this week's lab, is to do an assessment of who supports the pipeline and why, and who's opposed to the Energy East pipeline proposal and why. Before you go to your lab this week, there's a couple things you'll need to do. There's a couple of videos on my learning space about the Energy East pipeline proposal. There's videos that represent supporters of the project and videos that represent people who are in opposition to it. You're going to need to do a little bit of research. Your lab instructor is going to take you through a variety of activities to discuss the Energy East proposal and to sort of get you thinking about whether or not it should be supported or not, whether it should be approved or not. And then you're going to go off and do your own research about the project. You're going to identify all the different actors and stakeholders who have an opinion about this project, and you're going to identify who they are and what their views on the subject may be. And then you're going to have to write a report in which you discuss whether or not you would support the Energy East pipeline proposal or not. So that's an overview of this week's lab. I hope you enjoy it. It's a topic that's of great importance right across Canada and will be for time to come. And so I hope you get something out of it, and I'll see you in class.